Nemo Radio is on the air.
A, B, C. A, always, B, B, C, closing. Always be closing. Always be closing.
Surely you can't be serious.
I am serious. And don't call me Shirley.
Put that coffee down. Coffee's for closers only. Come after me! I'm a man! I'm 40!
Hey, it's John Nemo. Welcome back to another episode of Nemo Radio. So excited to share this because I'm obsessed with the band Pearl Jam, and they're going to bring me new business. So let me explain this, because I don't see enough people taking advantage of this online with their marketing, their branding, and especially with their sales follow-up. Now, this is to give you an example of what I'm doing. One of the things, obviously, we're all in sales, whether we realize it or not, every single day. And one of the classic scenarios that we all run into with sales is what happens. We talk to a prospect, we get them interested, and what do they say? Sometimes send a proposal, or I need time to think about it, or follow up with me in a week, or I have to meet with my partners, or whatever it is, right? And we get into this dance now of chasing online. Chase. And one of the challenges is, that I've found, at least in sales, and I'm sure it's true for you as well, is how do you get your chase messages to be read and acted on? Because as we all know, people, if you just keep sending the same follow-up that's like, hey, quick question, hey, any questions about the proposal, or hey, blah, blah, blah. Like, it's hard to find ways to get people emotional and to re-engage after the sales call. When you have that initial sales call, you have that emotion, you have that engagement, you have that connection. But then as the time gets further away, as they have to consider it or meet with a partner or go through the proposal or whatever it is, it's harder and harder to recapture that. And one of the easiest ways to do this is an example of, I had a prospect right now I'm working on. I've been chasing this deal for probably 3 weeks. It's a huge deal. It would be a 2-year contract. It would be the biggest deal I've ever signed a client to. So obviously it's worth me chasing. I've had 2 or maybe 3 calls now with the partners, and it's a big, heavy lift, right? As far as a sales approach. And one of the things I'm finding is the lead person on the project, is busy, and, they're not going to respond to every email or text. And I'm trying to find creative, unique ways to be politely persistent without pestering. And so here's where things get really interesting. With my content, and this is how everything ties together for you with content and branding and how you put yourself out there online and putting your personality into your content. So one of the things about me is I'll share a lot of, my passions and hobbies and stories and tales from the trenches and, goofball photos and videos and things like that. And one of my favorite things of all time is the band Pearl Jam. And so I've told lots of stories about Pearl Jam. I've found ways to work it into content. I was just telling the story the other day because I thought for a minute my wife might have mononucleosis. I was like, oh man, I had mono in 1995, 20-year-old college student. Worst part was I hadn't even kissed anybody, right? Mono's the kissing disease. I didn't even have a girlfriend or anything. I just got mono out of the blue. But anyway, was in the hospital. I had a really weird strain of mono that only 2% of people have. I'm in the hospital for 5 days, 104, 105 degree fever. I remember feeling like I was floating, like I was totally out of it. They thought I had spinal meningitis, which was a big thing at the time. With college kids, there was an outbreak where I live in the Twin Cities in Mankato, Minnesota, and some people died. And anyway, it ends up finally, after 4 or 5 days in the hospital, I finally test positive for mono. And the doctor comes in all relieved, oh, good, you're not going to die. You just have mono. You got to go home and, rest. And I was like, mono? No. There's a Pearl Jam concert Saturday in Milwaukee. I need a road trip with my friends, 6 hours to go see Pearl Jam. And the doctor's like, dude, are you insane? No, you're getting released in 2 days, and the concert is the day after. And I was like, I'm going. And so, of course, I went to Pearl Jam with mono, coughed the whole way, sick as a dog. But I had the car and my friends I was the ride, so they had to let me go. But I remember my friends being like, stay the hell away from us, and we got 7th row seats. It was amazing. But that's Pearl Jam, right? So I've told that story. They're my favorite band of all time. I listen to them nonstop. I sprinkle that in, right? I put personality into my content. I tell funny stories. I use the formula, and I've talked about this a ton. personal story plus business lesson equals the content. So I'll find a story about Pearl Jam, just like I'm doing in this podcast episode, by the way. I'm going to use a personal story about Pearl Jam plus a business lesson with sales follow-up to be the content for this podcast episode. So anyway, I have sprinkled Pearl Jam references into my online content. I've put it in my books. I even used it in one of my one-on-one LinkedIn messages as kind of an icebreaker, like, hey, I know LinkedIn is often formal, a couple quick things about me. You know, I'm a walking dad joke, blah, blah, blah. Like I had a couple just personal things. And by the way, Pearl Jam is the best band of all time. You know, no questions asked or whatever, like, and then a laughing emoji. And so this particular prospect on this huge deal that I'm working on, guess what? Turns out he's a massive Pearl Jam fan, just enormous, right? And so, you know, it really sparked great camaraderie on the sales call because we instantly could bond over something non-work related. One of this person's favorite topics on earth is Pearl Jam. Oh, that happens to be me too. He never would have known that, and I never would have asked him about that. I mean, I don't start a sales call like, well, hey, who's your favorite band, right? Like, but when you put your personality into your content, when you share your genuine, authentic self, your passions, your hobbies, your pursuits, you know, whatever it might be, that kind of plants these seeds for people to connect with you outside of work and around personal, you know, endeavors. And listen, this is something salespeople have understood since long before the internet, long before social media. That's why, you know, salespeople always would take a prospect to dinner, take them to a ball game, take them out to lunch, take them to the bar, right? Meet them somewhere, get to know them as a person. And then the best salespeople follow, you know, what Dale Carnegie talked about and How to Win Friends and Influence People of taking notes on a prospect, like what's important to them, what are their passions, what do they, you know, have for hobbies, all these things. There's a great story in How to Win Friends and Influence People of this door-to-door salesman calling on different businesses, and he's trying to win this big account. And he gets in to see the president, and it just bombs out, and the president's like, nope, I already got a vendor for that, don't need you. And while he's in there, he notices the guy has a book of stamps open on his desk. He's a stamp collecting, you know, and he's like, oh, are you a stamp collector? And the guy says, no, I hate stamps, but my kid, little Johnny, is a stamp collector, and I'm trying to find him these rare stamps, you know, to complete his collection. And, you know, kids, da, 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 da. So they end the thing and leave, and the salesman gets this idea, and he's like, I know what's important to the prospect is little Johnny, his kid, family, right, is one of our core things. And little Johnny is missing some stamps. And this guy mentioned which ones they are because I'm paying attention to detail as a sales guy. And so what this guy does, this is back in like the 1930s, he goes out and finds whatever stamps little Johnny is missing. And he books another appointment with the president. And he says, hey, this isn't even about sales. This is just, I found something I know that'll be helpful for you and your son. And the guy's curious. So he's like, okay, well, come on in. Yeah, what do you got? And he's like, hey, listen, I know you mentioned last time I was here, little Johnny's looking for these stamps. I actually have an interest or have a friend, or I don't know how he said it, but like basically I found these stamps here, give them to your kid. They'll make his day. And of course, then the president is all excited and this is great. And now they have this connection about little Johnny and solving a problem that this guy had as a dad that's going to make him a hero. And this is another piece of sales of anything you can do to enhance someone's ego, to make them feel important. This is straight out of a book from Les Giblin called How to Have Confidence and Power in Dealing with People. Whenever you can help someone genuinely feel more important. Alex Hormozzi talks about this too, if you want a current reference. Alex Hormozzi talks about, and he's a famous author now with online sales and everything, if you can help someone raise their status, they will want to work with you. So if you can raise this guy's status as a dad by being the hero to his kid, you solved a problem for him. That's demonstrating something as a salesperson where, wow, this guy's creative. He listens. He pays attention to detail. He really is creative in how he is trying to help me, even though it's not related to sales. Plus, then the reciprocity kicked in for this president of the company. Like, well, now I owe you a solid. Like, you helped me out with my kid. Like, let me look at your bid again. Let me look at your stuff. And he's like, actually, your stuff's good. You know what? We've been talking about maybe we should look at a different vendor. Let's meet again. And so sure enough, the guy wins the business, but his in was little Johnny's stamp collection. So I come back to Pearl Jam, right? Because I remember what Dale Carnegie said, when it comes to mattering to others, you got to discuss what matters to them. And yes, of course, I'm talking to this prospect and his business partners about work, and LinkedIn lead generation and all the ways we're going to help get them leads on LinkedIn. But that only goes so far, right? And that gets boring, and they have other things on their mind, and they're not going to sit there and answer every follow-up just because I'm anxious about it. So I always look for personalized excuses to follow up. So for example, I sent him an email this morning, subject line, Eddie Vedder. Now, if you know Pearl Jam, Eddie Vedder's the lead singer. He's this amazing, heroic force. Everyone, if you love Pearl Jam, you love Eddie Vedder. I mean, obviously. So the subject line of the email was Eddie Vedder. And then the next line I wrote was, now that I have your attention, where are we at on the proposal? And then, LOL or whatever. And he writes back within 10 seconds. Hey, here's where we're at. I have to meet with my partners on Friday. Thanks for following up. Now, if I had, with this same prospect and other prospects, if I had just sent a generic email, quick question, or hey, where are we at on the proposal? I often don't hear or wouldn't hear, but I know that he loves Eddie Vedder and Pearl Jam, so he's going to open it, right? And I'm having fun. I'm bringing my personality, bantering, things like that. And I even know my business coach talked about a story where he wanted to get featured on this guy's podcast, and this was a big influencer at the time. And this particular podcaster had a huge platform. My business coach was completely unknown, but my business coach listened and did the Dale Carnegie and was like, oh, this podcaster talks about his love for all things Batman. Like he loves Batman and Marvel and all these things. And so my business coach found like Batman artwork or bought something on eBay and sent it to this podcaster, just like, hey, I love your show. I know you're a Batman fanatic. Thought you'd find this helpful. Well, of course, now that podcaster influencer was like, who are you? This is so kind. Thank you for the gift. Yes, I love Batman. This artwork is perfect. Wow, that's so cool. Who are you? Tell me more about what you have going on. Oh, well, I'm a business coach and I think I could help your audience and blah, blah, blah. And next thing you know, my business coach is on that guy's show promoting himself. So it's finding these creative nuances where you can personalize your follow-up. And the way that you do it, there's a few different ways. One is you put yourself out there. You share your passions, your hobbies, what you love to do, because people are going to pick up on those personal threads and feel kind of a kinship or connection. So if you share your love for sailing or, sports cards or, whatever, skydiving, whatever it is, you're, in the context of your everyday business lessons, whatever, people are going to start to have a narrative to attach to you. Oh, that's the goofball stay-at-home dad that uses LinkedIn lead generation to help clients. And he also loves Pearl Jam and this and that. And when you actually talk to people on sales calls or in real life, like with this prospect, the first thing he said was, oh man, you're a Pearl Jam guy too. And I'm like, wait, Pearl Jam, what? He's like, well, yeah, I saw your, one-on-one message, your story about having mono and going to Pearl Jam anyway. I'm like, oh my God, you like Pearl Jam? How many shows have you been to? What's your favorite album? What's your favorite song? So we spent the first 5 minutes of the call talking about Pearl Jam. I knew in my head, if I need follow-up material, it's going to be an email that says, Eddie Vedder, now that I have your attention, right? And it's not manipulative or bad. It's just we can banter about that. Just like if I knew, I've had other clients or prospects where I know they have a certain sports team they love. So if their sports team's playing that week, I pay attention and I send them a note, a text or an email like, hey, nice win for your team. What do you think of the quarterback? And here's the amazing thing. People will respond to you instantaneously about their passions, their personal passions. They always have time to respond to an email or a text about Pearl Jam or the Chicago Bears or skydiving because that's fun to them. It's light. It's not work related. It's not heavy. But what it's doing is it's building rapport with you. You're becoming almost more of a friend and just, talking with each other as opposed to you're only talking business all the time every day. And what happens is people also then develop an affinity for you. You're likable, you're fun, you're relatable, and you're talking about their favorite topic on earth, which is themselves and their hobbies and their passions. And if you can find ways like, the example from Dale Carnegie with the stamp collection for little Johnny, or like my business coach sending a Batman artwork, you can find ways to really stand out from the sea of sameness as far as other vendors, other providers. And so that's been a real game changer for me. That That's something where it's easy enough to do. If you look at LinkedIn and look at a prospect's profile too, when you even reach out or follow up there, where do they live? Where did they go to college? Where have they worked? Did they list any volunteering or hobbies? And you can mention those things and sprinkle those into your follow-ups. Like, hey, I see you, you posted here that you did this, or you are a fan of this team, or you live in this city. How do you deal with the winters? And what happens is you just find that personal piece. And I think it's easy to ignore all that with algorithms and artificial intelligence and everything else, where we're trying to reduce people to numbers and spreadsheets and data points. And I love Les Giblin's book, How to Have Confidence and Power in Dealing with People, or maybe I have it backward. But he talks about that even, I think he wrote it in the 50s or 60s. He's like, the world's getting more technological by the day, right? In the 60s, 1960s. But he said, you can't reduce people to spreadsheets. You can't reduce them to numbers. Literally, I have a framed coaster on my desk that I put my drinks on that says, your ability to handle people is what makes you rich. So I see it every day when I have my over-caffeinated beverage. It literally says, your ability to handle people is what makes you rich. And that's from Dale Carnegie, How to Influence People. And it is. At the end of the day, we will never go out of the people business. Yes, we can get more savvy with technology and tools and automation. But if you can't build personal connection with people, you're not going to win business. You're not going to win their trust. You're not going to win the camaraderie, the rapport, because we all have those cave person brains that are like, do I like this person? Do I feel like I trust them? Do I think they'd be fun to work with? Do I feel a vibe, a connection? And the way that you build that is with non-work stuff, is with personal stuff. And so it's easier than ever with social media to kind of pick up on that by looking at people's social media profiles and go, hey, I saw your, posted you went to a Pearl Jam concert. That's so cool, or whatever, right? I mean, the best salespeople are going to do their research on a topic, and notice and pay attention to those clues and then sprinkle those in a non-creepy way, right? And another great way to do it is just to put it into your content, just like I did today, where you're going to remember from this podcast episode my Pearl Jam stories, right? And you're going to be like, oh, if I see the band Pearl Jam or hear the band Pearl Jam, I'm going to think of John Nemo. Just like if you think of Gary Vaynerchuk, if you follow him online, what do you think of with Gary Vaynerchuk? One of his passions is the New York Jets. Like, he talks about them all the time, not as much now, but like, especially in his earlier years, New York Jets, and he's a diehard fan and he wants to buy the team someday. And so whenever I see the New York Jets, what do I think of? I think of Gary Vaynerchuk. And I see him posting on social media, and I see people congratulating him on his team's win. And that's really smart because it makes him memorable, right? The biggest sin in branding and marketing is to be boring and be easily forgotten. And when you're not that way, when you're memorable, people will keep that attached to you and respond. So if you haven't tried that lately and you're getting prospects that are ghosting you, find something personal to follow up with. And don't even mention the proposal or work. Just say, hey, I noticed you mentioned Pearl Jam. Are you excited to hear they have a new album I heard is coming out? What are your thoughts? They will write you back about that. I will. Send me an email and put Eddie Vedder in the subject line and say, now that I have your attention, how can you help me with LinkedIn? And I will, or just say something about Pearl Jam and I'll go crazy, right? So anyway, hope you find that helpful. Hope you find that, as a new tactic to try if you're struggling in your follow-up process, because that's really an area where I don't see a lot of people doing that. And I think that's a real area of advantages that you and I can have, is personalizing the follow-up, kind of persistent, polite pestering to say like, hey, are we doing this deal or not? How did the meeting with the partners go? I know you mentioned to circle back in quarter two, but like staying in touch with people, you got to find something other than happy birthday and Merry Christmas, right? Which a lot of people do, but that's generic and everyone does it. But if you can find those little personal nuances about their favorite band, sports team, whatever, you're going to stand out from the crowd. So have at it. Hope that's helpful for you. And hope you're enjoying the podcast. If you are, subscribe. I heard that's a big thing on Apple. By the way, as a little tip for you, if you do have your own podcast, I was reading, I think it was Neil Patel or one of the people I follow about data was saying like the number one way to grow your podcast on Apple, at least, is subscribers. It's not about ratings or reviews. It's and that's why you can actually hire people on Fiverr. I've seen this before, and I tried it once because I was curious. They will spike your show just by having hundreds of people hit the follow show or subscribe button, and then it'll drop back down. But anyway, there you go. That's neither here nor there. It's just a little podcast behind the curtain, chicanery and trickery. But if you do enjoy the show, subscribe, like, comment, all that good stuff. And I'll see you soon on another episode.